What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about the fourth installment in the Alien franchise. And I'd been ranking these for a while, took a little bit of a break because I watched a bunch of different content. And I'm back on watching the remainder of the Alien series. And this is a movie that I have seen once prior to this, and I remember virtually nothing about it. This was essentially like a brand new watch for me. And what I do remember is that this was directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who also directed Amelie, which is just the weirdest thing in the world to me. That it's like thinking about this man's filmography is just absolutely wild. And I know this is typically regarded as one of the worst in the franchise, but I also know there's some people out there who genuinely seem to like it. So I was excited to go into this with a fresh perspective and to just kind of see how it sat with me this time around and what I would think about it. And the movie I'm going to be discussing with you today is Alien Resurrection. Alien Resurrection is directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. 200 years after Lieutenant Ripley died, a group of scientists clone her, hoping to breed the ultimate weapon. But the new Ripley is full of surprises, as are the new aliens. Ripley must team up with a band of smugglers to keep the creatures from reaching Earth. So I was really excited to watch this movie because it had been a long time since I'd seen it, and this is by far my least favorite of the franchise so far. It is really not that great of a movie. I don't think that it's miserable by any means, and it has a lot of fantastic ideas. The first hour of this is genuinely great, and then it becomes more of the same of what you've seen in all three of the other movies prior, and it just completely loses its footing and becomes just kind of an unbearable watch towards the third act, to where it's so chaotic editing wise. The characters in this aren't nearly as interesting as the ones in the previous installments, and I'm going to talk about that when I break the movie down for you today. So in the beginning of this movie, we are jumped on board of this new ship where we're not dealing with Weyland-Yutani anymore. We are dealing with the actual like galactic government, and they have decided to clone Ellen Ripley, and they have merged her DNA with a xenomorph. So she is unkillable. She looks just like Ellen Ripley, but she also has a mental connection with the xenomorphs. And through the early parts of the film, we learn a little bit about what the government is doing and why they are doing it. And we get a little bit of information as to what's going on with this clone Ripley. They're like teaching her the alphabet and all different things, but her intelligence grows very rapidly. And simultaneously, we are introduced to this other group of smugglers, including characters played by Ron Perlman and Winona Ryder and all of these different actors that you'll recognize, that are bringing these goods on board of this ship to get some cash. And so they get on board, and Winona Ryder's character eventually confronts Ripley and says that she wants to kill these creatures because they're going to wreak havoc on planet Earth if they ever manage to get there. And while that's going on, eventually the smugglers get into conflict with the members of the military that work for the government on board, and of course the xenomorphs that are on board eventually break loose. And the entirety of the film is the clone Ripley and this group of people trying to survive on board this new ship. So like I said, I feel like this movie is the worst of the bunch. I didn't feel like this movie was very well thought out, to be quite honest. It has some really good ideas initially. I feel like whenever they are examining the idea of the government essentially like combining DNA of xenomorphs with humans, you see this like station where it looks like they're just planning face huggers on humans to give birth to new xenomorphs to experiment on them. And thinking about how this entire franchise has kind of shown the corruption by this company to eventually it's the corruption by the government, I think that's really fascinating, and it's a different angle than what we've seen before with like the experimentation. And I feel like if you did an entire movie surrounding that where the villains were government rather than just the xenomorphs, you could have taken this movie in a really interesting direction. I think Sigourney Weaver's great in this movie as per usual. She gets to ham it up in this movie. Like you can just tell she is having the time of her life, and there are a lot of lines of dialogue she delivers in this that are really great, and I always enjoy when she's on screen. I like Ron Perlman. Perlman, he has some really cheesy moments in this. Winona Ryder's fine. She could honestly have been replaced by any actress in this movie, and it would have been exactly the same. I didn't really feel like there was much to her performance that was all that special, but I love Winona Ryder, so it was good seeing her in the movie anyways. I'm not the biggest fan of this group of smugglers. I didn't find any of them really all that interesting, and they didn't really keep me hooked on screen. I was always far more interested when they jump back to the government and the experiments that they're doing. Like Brad Dourif plays one of the scientists on board, and he has like a really unhinged scene in this movie that I thought was fantastic. He honestly steals a lot of the show for me in this movie. I thought that he was really great. And as per usual in Alien, the practical effects in this are phenomenal. There are several scenes that look really great. There are some gnarly visuals in this movie, which is what I always enjoy whenever I'm watching an Alien film, is like the really phenomenal practical effects, and this is no exception. But the problem with this movie is it's just so incredibly dumb. The dialogue in this is some of the worst in the franchise, and I don't like the dialogue in Aliens much. The military jargon, I get kind of annoyed with it, but the dialogue in this movie feels like a sci-fi original film. It's really hokey. The delivery from the actors is really bad, and it takes me out of it consistently. It just does not live up to the quality to the first three films. Tonally, this movie jumps much more into the guns ablazing aliens level of absurdity. It's not grounded in any of the horror of the first film or the third film. Like, I didn't find this movie to be exceptionally scary in any moment. There's one scene that I really love, which is where they have to swim through the flooded kitchen, and because of the new environment, I just found it to be really suspenseful. It was really well shot in that moment, and I liked it a lot. But the problem is, this movie turns into more of people running down a hallway away from the xenomorphs. And the thing is, when your entire franchise is based on one gimmick, by the fourth movie, it just becomes very tiresome. And when you're not adding anything exceptionally new other than the creature at the end of the film, which I feel like is so glazed over, very similar to the issues that I had with Alien Romulus, you just kind of ask yourself, why did this movie exist? And so much of the tail end of this felt very rushed, and like they just put it together at the last minute. And I'm sure that's exactly what happened. It didn't feel like it had a super high budget. A lot of the computer generated stuff in this movie does not look good, similar to what I complained about with Alien 3, where it just looks really, really bad. Whenever they go back to practical, it's amazing, but in those moments, it's just really rough to watch. And by the end of this movie, it just felt so anticlimactic. Like, none of the characters mattered all that much. I felt like Ripley got really great closure at the end of the third movie, and so her character being reintroduced in this, I just didn't care all that much. And I was mostly bored, unfortunately. I felt like so many scenes just felt very padded, and that the performances outside of Sigourney Weaver's were all kind of hokey. And Brad Dourif's performance works really well for this movie, but even like Ron Perlman was just like hamming it up, and I wasn't the biggest fan of his in this, and I loved him in Sons of Anarchy. I think he's an incredible actor, but just I didn't like him all that much in this movie. And like I said, Winona Ryder, her character plays enough of a significant importance to this movie, but like there's something about her in this film, she just didn't add much for me. And I don't see myself revisiting this when I go through the franchise again, unless like someone really wanted to watch it with me. I have the Blu-ray pack that has all of the films up to Alien Covenant, and so I like to go back and revisit franchises often, but this is one that I would probably skip over when I got to it again. So have you seen Alien Resurrection? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was incredibly cheesy, really poorly put together, and I probably wouldn't watch it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.